Welcome to the Transportation Committee meeting of Wednesday, October 22nd, 2014. I'm Councilmember Mike Bonin, the chair, joined by my colleagues Mr. Bernard Parks and Mr. Paul Krikorian. I believe Mr. Koretz will be joining us shortly. Let me start, as is our custom here, with our multimodal roll call. For those of you who haven't been here before, we do a check-in from the last meeting 2 weeks ago. By a show of hands, who here has commuted by bus or by train? Very good. By bicycle? Pedestrian? All right. Nice going there, Mr. City Attorney.
Do I get to stay?
Gotta lose weight.
Yes, you get to stay. Thanks. Okay, so let's get down to business. Colleagues, I was going to recommend that we do items 1, 3, and 6 by consent, unless anybody had questions on them.
1, 3, and 6?
Yeah.
Nope. Okay. That's fine with me.
All right, so that'll be the direction of the committee.
Thank you.
I should also note that item number 5 was erroneously referred to this committee. It's actually a matter that goes before the TCT committee, so I'm going to recommend we not take any action on that since it doesn't belong here.
Good.
All right, so that leaves us with items 2 and 4. Let's start with item number 2.
Item number 2 is a DOT report relative to developing a funding strategy to reinstate the city's speed pump program.
Thank you. And we'll start, before staff comes up, we have 2 public comment cards. Ronnie Carboni and Kevin, I can't make out your last name, Carabio. You can come on up to the table. You can sit next to each other, but talk individually.
Talk individually.
But there's only one.
You don't have to speak simultaneously.
Not simultaneously. Okay.
In perfect harmony, please.
Not in harmony. Oh, you're expecting a lot, Councilman.
Mr. Carboni, we'll begin with you. You have 2 minutes.
Okay. I'm looking forward to the re-implementation of the speed hump program. I think it's a wonderful program. However, I do believe the neighborhood input can be beneficial to establishing city practices and policies. However, I strongly feel that more frequently than none, neighborhood associations consisting of entitled, self-serving members who may lack one iota of relevant technical knowledge inappropriately place their ill-conceived, fragmented agendas above the best interests of the city. Therefore, I cherish the notion that layman input should neither override existing sound and prudent departmental policies, nor the wisdom and expertise of professionally trained traffic engineers and their colleagues. By example, I live on Ocean Avenue, and right in front of my duplex, there's speed humps. And it's also a primary emergency response route. And I submitted the documentation for the council to look at. And I think it's very important that we look at all the speed humps to make sure that they're not on primary emergency routes, and that in fact there's not a lot of traffic. Where I live, there is gridlock. Ocean Avenue, the main artery to Marina del Rey. And I also submitted from the fire department their email to me indicating that it is a primary emergency response route. And if we look at the feasibility, it says where we have tremendous amount of traffic or a primary emergency route, it's not feasible. We could put in signal lights, stop signs, but nevertheless, we overlooked it for some strange reason. So I think it's important that we look at all our existing speed humps, and we get from the fire department a listing of their emergency response routes, which I understand that transportation engineers currently do not have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carboni.
Thank you, sir.
Kevin.
Good afternoon, council members. Kevin Acabio on behalf of Councilmember Weezar's office. I just wanted to come and congratulate and say thank you for the department for putting together this report. We know speed humps and the request for speed humps are a request that's high not only throughout our district but across the city and we look forward to a time that they can be fully integrated and implemented into the suite of city services, not only to create more livable and pedestrian-friendly streets, but to improve the quality of life for all those present. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you. We will now ask the department to come on up.
Selwyn Hollins, Department of Transportation.
Jonathan Huey, Los Angeles Department of Transportation. We're here to present the report regarding, there were 2 council motions to inquiring on the resources required to reinstitute a speed hump program. To summarize, the speed hump program was discontinued in 2009 due to permanent budget reductions, and the dedicated staff and contractual services were eliminated then. But due to large public demand, as a first step, the council requested a report to determine the resources necessary to reinstitute the speed hump program. So basically what the report includes is a kind of based on the previous existing speed hump program, as well as the best practices from other municipalities, develops an application-based model for reinstituting speed humps in the city, and the necessary staff and contractor to build the speed humps.
So we open it up to any questions for the council.
Mr. Kretz?
You know, I have a long-running pet peeve with this, because we've had a developer-funded speed hump request in for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years now, completely funded, and we have no way to actually follow it up and put in a speed hump. I've even mentioned it, I believe, here in this committee a few months ago, and I was assured, of course, we'll go and put in the speed hump. Still haven't found a way to do it. So at least where they're fully funded, there has to be some way to have an oversight and check-off system to do it. Obviously, we have a bigger question of how to fund it where it isn't funded, but where the city has a commitment to pay whatever it costs to put in a speed hump, you would think we'd have some ability to do it. So I would hope we'd at least, at a minimum, look at a first step, maybe even in the interim before we bring something back that's a complete program for how we can actually put in speed humps where it shouldn't cost the city a dime. And I don't know if anybody's still looking at that possibility.
I can't speak specifically to that particular location, but of course that is a possibility of taking in existing funds. There is historically in the past, on a case-by-case basis, speed humps have been referred by council motion, and the department can create a design bid package that the requester could then use to build. Currently, the department does not have I believe, a contractor to construct speed humps in earnest currently.
Let me try to throw you a lifeline here. Under your proposal, there is a provision that circumstances like Mr. Koretz is describing could be accommodated, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So going forward, once your report comes back, there would be a way for self-funded speed humps to be installed?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Koretz's concern is what's happening currently, and it sounds like he asked a question in this committee about a particular one.
And I think the new general manager might have even committed to putting it in right away at that time, if I recall correctly.
Again, I couldn't speak specifically to that one, but I will follow up with her. Yeah.
So let's ask Ms. Reynolds to get in touch with Mr. Koretz and give him a status update one-on-one.
Fair enough.
Do you have any other questions?
No, not for now.
A question, I'll turn it over to my other colleagues before I ask a lot, but there was one question on what Mr. Koretz just asked. When you bring the program back, assuming that we can come up with a financing plan and there's a way to accommodate the self-funded requests, are we starting from zero, or is stuff that may already be in the queue going to be in the new queue?
The idea behind the model is that there would be, it would start from zero. There would be an annual application deadline, and so we do have all the a lot of existing requests for speed humps over the over the last few years that the program hasn't been in place. We can notify all of those people that put in the requests of the new program, of what's involved in the application process. The idea is to try to consolidate all the application processing together so that we can better sort of efficiently use resources, schedule the work, and kind of prioritize the projects so that they get the resources that they need. Fund projects that are not funded by the city and they're self-funded, they would still be required to meet the feasibility requirements for speed humps, but they wouldn't be on that prioritized list. It would be outside that list. They wouldn't be subject to the priority for resources.
So if a bunch of residents in one of our districts mobilized over the past year and they really were pushing for a speed hump, and we said there's no speed hump program currently in the city of Los Angeles, but when it comes back, we'll be happy to look at it, and they continue to do work and did the outreach and all that, they have to start from scratch again?
Well, if they had all of the community support that they needed, a lot of the homework would already be done for them. The initial application would just require, the location and then a minimum petition of 10 people, and then the department can do the feasibility study on the speeds, the volumes, the traffic collisions, and then they could, if they're already mobilized, getting the petition would be that much easier for them.
What if there were a case where DOT had approved a speed hump installation, and then we suspended the program and there was no funding, so it never happened? They have to start over?
Yeah, the last program hasn't been for 5 years, so there's a possibility the community could have changed, the nature of the commuters or the people driving in that community could have changed. So it would make sense to reevaluate those locations and make sure it's appropriate.
Okay. Mr. Parks?
Yeah, I was wondering, on the 45 that are in the queue, do you have any idea where they're located?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Supposed to be 45 that in the backlog?
I don't know that. We don't have a backlog, I'm not sure.
Okay, I thought you said that you're going to clean up the backlog.
No, what I said is that we have a service request system, and the public can just request speed humps,
So-
even though there's no program.
So you have none in the queue now?
There's no speed hump queue, no.
Okay.
But on the issue of request, there are, what is the number for request?
Over 200 in the last year and a half or so.
200 requests. Okay, that's what I was, 200 requests. And they're just pending, waiting for funds.
They're waiting to find out if they can get a speed hump. So there hasn't been any study or outreach done. They're just, speeding is a problem in my neighborhood, we'd like a speed hump.
So there's 200 requests. And then, so they have to go through the process of formal application and all that? Okay.
Correct.
And there's no funds to do them?
No.
Okay. And then when you talk about that $2-point-something million, that's a proposal that you could do 150 so with that?
Right. So that includes a minimum amount of staff to administer the program, as well as the contractor to build the speed humps.
Okay. And then if you get requested, are they constructed by first come, first serve? Are they constructed by district? How does the funds divvy up?
They would be done. They would be on a prioritized. We would prioritize the applications based on their the necessity of the problem, the speeding problem, the volume, traffic volume, as well as collisions.
Okay. So there'd be no part of the criteria that looks at region, to where if you made a criteria that fits all in one part of the city, that's where the funding, or do you give any consideration as to each part of the city getting some of them?
It could be a consideration.
And then approximately what does a speed hump generally cost?
To construct, approximately $2,500 per hump, and then each location is usually, there's about 3 humps, so $7,500 per location.
And then do we allow outside contractors to build them?
Yes, this would be an outside contractor.
And so when we say they're self-funded, they also can get self-construction. They can get the same, put the money in and get a contractor out to build them.
Well, if we'd have already obtained the services of a contractor, they could transfer the money and we could have it done
Okay, so
for them to
use
make
the
it
city's
simpler.
contractor.
Correct.
Okay, and that's part of that 7,500 is the engineering and all the costs?
No, the design for the speed hump is about $2,000.
Okay.
That's $7,500 is just the construction.
Okay, so give me the overall cost.
So the overall cost would be about $9,500.
Okay, 9,500, and that's 3 humps across the street?
3 humps, right, over 1 to 3 blocks.
Okay, that's it, thank you.
Just a quick follow-up to Mr. Park's question. Aren't there standard specs for speed humps?
Yes.
So why does it cost $2,000 to engineer a speed hump?
The engineering is not with respect to the actual construction of the individual hump. It's with respect to the all of the background work that's required to determine where they should be located, the survey for the speeds, all of the homework and that has to be done. Creating the plan, the contract administration, all the administrative costs and engineering behind where to put them and to make sure that it's accommodates the community.
Okay, so that cost that you just broke down for Mr. Parks would be DOT costs, but there's presumably also going to be some costs that are going to have to come out of fire, I don't know, maybe street services. If 150 locations are actually built out, there's going to be an increase in some of the cost of those other departments as well, right?
Possibly in time, yes.
Okay. So I'm just looking at the list of sort of the project life cycle steps, and that's helpful because even though we don't have a speed hump program, each of us gets asked all the time, what do you have to do to get a speed hump? And so if we are going to do this, I'd like to be able to sort some of those requests out. So first of all, what would be the disqualification factors at the entry level before you even go out to the neighborhood to see support? What are the sorts of things that disqualify a request?
So there's what I would call sort of deal breaker places where we don't install speed humps. For example, it's on a public bus route, or if it's an arterial street, if the speed limit's over 30 miles an hour already, if it's on a really steep hill. These are the kinds of things where speed humps they're not appropriate to install, and so those locations, if they happen to be requested, we couldn't accommodate. That would be a disqualification screening.
Okay. So once you've screened the request for those things, then you go out to the neighborhood and presumably within some distance radius you get the input of the public on this?
Well, we would do a feasibility study to make sure, to check this, we'd actually do a speed survey and check the speeds and come up with kind of a basic idea of where the speed humps might go.
Sorry, one step back.
Sure.
When you're doing your verification of initial interest petition, what's the measure of neighborhood interest that you're looking for there?
They would do a petition with like 10 people just to show that there's some people in the community. It's not just, like one person that's asking for it. It's like there's some people that are interested, but we're not going to make them go out and petition every single person.
Okay.
That would come later.
Okay, so since a speed survey has to be a part of the feasibility study, and the streets for which people are going to be requesting speed humps are necessarily or likely going to be places where you're getting speeding and cross-through traffic. Is there a danger if we do a speed survey on a street where there is speeding, that we're going to have to increase the posted speed limit because of that?
I haven't
Given
thought
the
about
fact that if you reach that 85th percentile and it's in fact people are driving 35 miles an hour down that 20-mile-an-hour street, is there a risk then that we have to raise the speed limit? And then presumably if the speed humps do get built, speed will come down. You could do a subsequent speed survey and measure the posted speed limit based on that. But that would be my concern. If the speed hump doesn't go in and you've done a speed survey, then you're on the hook to actually increase the speed limit. It would worsen the problem if you don't do the speed humps.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm not actually sure if that there's a risk. The 85th, I don't know the answer to that question.
Maybe it doesn't have practical import because on these sorts of streets there's probably not going to be radar enforcement anyway. I don't know, but it's just, anyway, it's a potential issue that I think we ought to look at. And then lastly, what is the formal petitioning that you have in the sixth part of the life cycle? What goes into the formal petitioning?
The requesters would receive a petition, and they would require 75% of the property owners in that area to qualify.
Would that just be property owners on the particular street or within a certain radius of that street? How does that work?
It would be on the street.
Okay. Okay, well, those are just all sorts of implementation issues, but I think it's really important that we move forward with this, and I appreciate your having done this report because this is something that we all hear about an awful lot. There's a great need for it, and it's an important step in bringing down overall speeds and making the streets safer for pedestrians and bicyclists, so I appreciate it very much.
Mm-hmm.
You certainly may.
You know, I just want to make sure I understood what you said. It sounds like there's two surveys. One you find preliminarily if there's interest, and then as you get going, you have to do the more in-depth.
Correct.
Okay. And that's at 75% or something?
Correct.
Now, I think we've discussed this before in this committee. It just seems as though we're pricing ourselves out of business. It's almost $10,000 for a speed hump. And then the amount of time and effort that we use to go out, and I thought we surveyed people that 80% was merely to find out where you want to place it, because people complain if it's in front of their house or next door. And so it seems like a while back we were talking about, can that be streamlined to where you're not having to put forth all that effort and interview everybody, go through all that process. Now it seems like we have a second survey, and we still got to get it engineered, and then all of a sudden there's got to be $90-some hundred that you pay for. That may be why we don't have a speed hump program. I mean, just the mechanics of it just seems as though it's laborious. And somebody was going to look into that a couple of years ago.
I'm not sure I understand
Well, the thing
question.
is, we have a process. You got to go through engineering. Mr. Corcoran asked if they're pretty well standard, you know, why $2,500 for engineering? Then you got to come up with a total of $9,500 to pay for it. Then you got to survey 80% of the people to find out where on the street you might place it in case people complain about it being in front of their house. At some point, it just seems like we bogged ourselves down to where that may be why we don't have a speed hump program, because it's not streamlined, it's very costly, and it could take forever to happen.
So I think that the engineering, the actual design of the speed hump wouldn't happen, or the construction, those wouldn't happen until the formal petitioning process would happen. So
But
there would.
takes a long time too, the petitioning. Get 80% of people on the block to come to some conclusion. It could be a nightmare too.
Yes, in the past it has, and we're the idea of the annual process is to make sure that the citizens have skin in the game, so that they know that they have a time where they can apply and they can they can sort of.
What I'm saying is that it just seems as though they're not being asked to upkeep speed hump. They're just, we're saying, why do you need 80% of the people to be surveyed about where a speed hump goes when you're trying to mitigate traffic that could save a life or two?
It wouldn't be just to determine the location, but also to determine if those people want the speed hump. The speed hump, while it does reduce speeds, it's not, depending on where it is, they may not want it for various reasons. It's in front of their house, it's very disruptive, there's noise, it could be outside their children's bedroom. I mean, there could be a number of reasons that are very sensitive that the people may not want the speed hump. And the idea of the 75% threshold is to really make sure that everyone, there is a critical mass of people in the community who really would want it and are willing to live with that lifestyle change.
My final question, it seems as though if we go out and engineer it and we go through this criteria, we've made some assessment or commitment that there's a need for safety. And so it didn't add on to that all those mechanics. It seems like we're putting the safety behind and saying, now, where do people want it? If we engineer it and say it fits the criteria and it does create a mitigation, it seems like that would be the thing to move on, as opposed to we do the engineering, we look at the mitigation, then we survey the people and say, where do you want it? Maybe where they want it misses the point of where you get the most effective use of it. That's where we talked about before with DOT. It seems like we created a process that we can't get out of our way.
I understand. It's a very delicate balance between what people want and the benefits that they could all benefit from.
I give.
I think it's also a question of allocation of resources. It's not as if we have the resources to install a speed hump everywhere one is requested. And I imagine some of that is a measure to see, is this a place where we're going to put the speed hump in and the neighborhood really wants it? Because there might be a neighborhood in the next district where everybody really wants it, or a place where 50% of the people are going to scream bloody murder after it goes in. I mean, you want to put it, if we have not enough resources to fill all of our needs, you want to put the needs where the support is. A couple questions. What is the role of LAPD or LAFD in evaluating whether a speed hump would pose a problem for emergency ingress and egress?
We would submit the location to them for their review.
Historically, how long does it take them to respond?
I don't know that number. I would have to check with what it was when in the past.
The reason I ask is because, as I recall, you're proposing sort of a time limit on a request, and if it doesn't happen by a certain period of time, it needs to start over again. I think it was it a 2-year period?
In this proposal?
Yeah.
It would be an annual.
That concerns me a great deal because sometimes it can take several months for a department to get around to reviewing something. And when does the clock start ticking and when does it end? Because I can't imagine this whole process for most cases between getting the signatures of 80% of the people on the block, between getting a design review from DOT, by getting LAPD and LAFD to sign off, all of that happens in a year.
Yes, this model of program is relatively new to the department. I wouldn't say that you will have 150 speed humps, but within 12 months it would take. There would be some buildup to understand the nuances of the program and how long things are really taking to get it up to speed. The idea is that there would be you'd need a minimum amount of staff, and then it could be scalable. Maybe.
Let me ask the question this way. Today
Sure.
is October 22nd. If I'm a resident of my district and I call in and request a speed hump and begin the process that you have outlined, and it is not installed by October 22nd of 2015, am I starting over?
No. If you had applied if you had applied today, and we'd start the process. Within, I would say, a month, we would know if it's feasible, and we would have a list of priorities. And let's say it does meet the threshold, and it is a priority project. And then it would take you, say, a month to do your petitions, and you get that approval. So everything is ready to go within 2 months. Then it would be a year for it to be installed. So it would be 14 months, I guess, beginning to end,
So
ideally.
I'm trying to get a sense of where the clock starts ticking for the request. If it's a 1-year time limit, does the clock start ticking at the request when it's made, or does the clock start ticking after DOT has approved installation?
The clock for construction?
For this, you fall off the approval list after if it's not done in a year.
So if you'd applied 1 year, you would automatically be reapplied the following year.
Yeah, that's not good. That you're telling the constituent they have to start over again.
That would only be if it wasn't prioritized, though. It didn't make the cut for prioritization, if that makes sense.
Not entirely.
After step 4 in the life cycle. So that's before you even get to the...
What I'm trying to avoid is a situation where a constituent has to go out and do the organizing over something a second time through no fault of their own. Either a department taking too long to come back, or a glitch in the contracting process, or the fact that, say this turns out to be sort of like it was a couple years ago, where it was essentially 2 speed hump installations per council district. If someone who lives in Mar Vista in my district has something in the queue, they've done all this work, and DOT comes to me and says, we can only do 2 of these in your district this year, and I don't prioritize that one, that means they have to start all over again, right?
No, it would, because it would, I mean, let's say it's the first year of the program, and they'd go through everything and it's approved and it's in the construction budget, then it will be done. If it's not within the budget for construction, in other words, it's not prioritized high enough, it will be automatically reapplied for the following year. And then after that, they would have to go through the process again. Their application and all of their support, that would be good for 2 years, in other words.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the timeline. I just don't, I've worked for the city a long time, and I just have a bit of a jaundiced perspective on how quickly things happen and how easily something can get delayed, and how often the constituent gets put on the hook for having to do that again. So I'd like to see a longer window on that.
Sure.
Right now it's 1 year. I think 3 is certainly better. I don't know if colleagues, if any of you have
I think it's horrible that we're even talking about 3 years to get a speed bump.
I agree.
I mean, that's just my mind.
But I don't want to pretend
Oh, no, I don't think we
it
should.
will happen in a year.
No, but I don't think we should put people through an exercise,
Right.
but I don't know, I mean, they could cure cancer in 3 years.
Anybody else have any thoughts on the time limit?
Well, I agree that people shouldn't have to start from scratch. My only concern would be is that if you put that out to 3 years, nature and bureaucracy abhors a vacuum. And if you say 3 years, it will become 3 years. And that would be I mean, I think in a sense, the year puts kind of a check-in date on it. And it makes sure that the process continues to move. But then if we get to that year and through no fault of the neighborhood because there's a departmental failure of some kind, they shouldn't have to start from scratch. Right. So if we can find some balance to keep the shorter time frame, but...
So they even have to start over to stay in the queue.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They should stay in the queue. So why don't
eliminate it entirely.
Yeah.
Supplement?
Yes, Mr. Fretz.
I would agree, but on the outside, I'm not even sure 3 years isn't too tight. I wouldn't mind seeing 4 or 5, where people didn't have to completely start from scratch if they weren't prioritized high enough, but there still was a clear need. But also some sort of check-in, I think that's not a bad idea either.
So how about after a year of of this being implemented, you report back on how successful folks have been at meeting the one-year timeline and whether or not we need to revisit the span of time for the ticket clock.
Sure.
Let me ask whether, this is only on issues if somebody can afford to pay their own. This is not the city paying.
Well, I think the department's report is recommending that
Right.
they work with the CEO, come back with a funding to fund the program. So the rules and issues that you're talking about would be incorporated into that when they come back.
All right, so if we approve this, what's the next step for you?
The next step would be for us to potentially submit this as a budget package for the fiscal year 15-16 budget.
Is there a budgetary implication for the self-funded ones, like the one Mr. Koretz was talking about?
We don't have the staff, so they would obviously have to fund whatever services would be needed, which would be included in their price or in their reimbursements. I guess what you're asking for is anything can happen with the budget process, so could there be some interim solution, and we can probably look at that and see what potentials there could be. We have, on rare occasions, have assisted council offices in trying to do it for development projects, but in general, it is a stretch for us to be able to provide the level of service that I think you want to see. Some of this, I would say, for the time being, we can, of course, put forth a budget package. If it makes it to the budget hearings, that would be an opportunity for us to do a real program that really has meaning and value. We also have a little concern about not opening it up where whoever has money could come in and get it and create this wave of requests that we really can't handle. So we'd rather have some type of structure for your consideration before we even try to do something like that. One or two here or there is possible, but I think each of you probably have a number of people in your district who come up with funding to do this, and I'd hate to have them disappointed by us not being able to fill our end of the deal.
Do you have a vendor on board that can do it? Or do the
No, we do not.
buy it on city employees?
To construct speed humps, we have no one. Street Services has no one to construct. Take that back. Street Services replaces speed humps, as you know, when they do resurfacing. But they don't have, that's part of the resurfacing program. They don't have dedicated people to devote to this kind of thing. So we would need to get a contractor on board who can make this happen.
So if someone wanted to hire a contractor, do we have an approved list they could do, and then they could do it?
No, we do not at the current time. We'd have to go out and, of course, do a solicitation to establish a contractor to do this type of work.
So why don't we move this forward and prove it, but can you report back to us in 30 days on what it would take to bring a contractor on board that could do for the places that want to pay for it?
Yeah, and I think what we should, it's one thing to have a contractor on board that is under our department to oversee and pay and creating that expectation that we're going to pay them. What you're talking about is someone who wants to fund it, where it's not a cost to the department.
Right.
So really what you're looking for is sort of an approved list of screen contractors who could potentially do it. It doesn't mean that when you do contracts in the city, there's an expectation from contractors that we're going to guarantee them so much money for their services, and this is a little different. So I think maybe the approach would be we work with Street Services, maybe identify some possible contracting requirement and see if there's some way to maybe make a list.
That'd be great. It's certainly worth exploring.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So, any objection, the committee will approve this and move it forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Number 4?
Item number 4 is a Blumenfeld-Krikorian-Bonin motion instructing DOT in cooperation with the LAPD to work with Metro to examine options for enhancing service performance and ridership on the Metro Orange Line.
Mr. Krikorian, would you like to take the lead on this?
Yeah, just to set this up briefly, pursuant to the motion that I introduced within the Metro Board to expand the capacity of the Orange Line, Metro staff came back with a report on September 17th, listing some of the options that might be available to increase capacity and speed on the Orange Line. And there were both immediate, intermediate term, and long-term options. And Mr. Blumenfield's motion, Mr. Blumenfield and I brought this motion in order to begin the discussion between city staff and Metro on some of those shorter-term options so that we can immediately get to work on increasing capacity, speed, convenience, and so forth. And so that's the motion that's before us today, and I'd like to turn it over to our staff.
Good afternoon, council members. Bill Shaw, Department of Transportation.
I'm John Hilmer, Executive Officer for Metro, responsible for service development and service councils.
So this is LADOT in general on the council motion on the bullet number 1. We are in full concurrence to bullet number 1 of this council motion, and we will endeavor to support this Metro's request. We see this motion consistent to be the previous council actions that was numbered Council File 072441. At the time was entitled Development and Implementation of Department of Transportation's Communications Plan in connection with distribution of traffic congestion data from the Automated Traffic Surveillance and Control System. And so we see that to be inconsistency of the previous council direction, and therefore we obviously support that. The general concept, as Metro might be telling you, general concept was previously discussed last year between the managements respective between Metro and LADOT. Metro currently has an access to the traffic data noted in this notion, and LADOT will position itself to provide Metro with the technical assistance as requested by this motion in the arena of hardware and software development as an information systems to the Metro's Bus Operations Center, and in order for Metro to fully utilize this data to the benefit of Metro Orange Line. The subject matter was previously communicated to the council. On May 5th, 2014, our former general manager had communicated with the council as a budget report back item, question number 172, on a proposed, at the time, our general commitment to assist Metro. It's subject to Metro entering some kind of MOU or an agreement with the city such that we may begin this effort. Relative to bullet number 2, on a speed, LADOT does not have the jurisdiction relative to speed limits within Metro's right-of-way. However, LADOT will coordinate with Metro, LAPD, or County Sheriff in this case to see what may be of assistance by LADOT. And we will report back to the council on the specifics of this council motion once we understand from Metro what the specifics, tasks, and assistance that LADOT may be of assistance for. That pretty much concludes the general picture. The previous council, a previous report back to the council, department talks about how we see, department sees this as possibly a test pilot project that was never done, but it was we could possibly get ourselves connected, align the city and Metro perhaps with the federal connected vehicle initiative promoted by the United States Department of Transportation. So we saw it as an information system for Metro to benefit them.
Just if I may, one follow-up before we hear from the public. Mr. Bonin, you indicated that the city doesn't have authority within the right-of-way on speed limits, but the city would have to approve a speed limit change at the crossings, would it not?
We understand the original limit to speed crossing was imposed by Metro Board. That the city, in talking to the people, because the project originally was a design build in Metro, the city was assisting Metro with it, and we understood the present speed limit, correct me if I'm wrong, Metro, that current speed limit at the crossings were implemented after the grand opening of Metro Orange Line, and in response to several accidents at the time, there was a motion of Metro Board itself as opposed to the city.
Well, maybe we can make this very easy then. Is it the city's position that Metro can unilaterally change the speeds at intersection crossings on the Orange Line then without approval of the city?
Yes, it is.
Great. Less need to collaborate then, I guess.
Yeah, the city would simply have to, we have to understand what the new speeds at crossings are so we can try to align our signals along to their needs.
Which actually becomes a bigger issue, but that's an issue that can happen after these changes take place.
That's correct.
Great.
I might say that the Orange Line is a highly successful service, and next week, Wednesday, the Orange Line will reach its 9th anniversary. It's been in service for 9 years, almost 9 years, and a highly successful service. Over 30,000 people on average weekday board that line. It's a collaborative piece of work between the city and Metro. The signaling system is coordinated from the buses to the signal system, and there's a need for us to make sure that we continually update and coordinate with one another. The proposal that staff is going to be making to Metro Board is we will investigate each of the signalized crossings on the Orange Line to determine if we feel that the maximum speed limit through those intersections for the Metro buses could be raised from 10 miles per hour to 25 miles per hour. When the line was first operated, the signals were put on what was an abandoned freight line, and there was no traffic, no signals on that location. So when the system first came into being, it seems that several motorists did not realize that there was a traffic signal at that location and ran the red light in most cases and ran into the bus. So in response to that, it was determined let's slow down the buses to see if we can avoid any of those type of situations again. Now's the time to reinvestigate and possibly improve the speeds through those intersections and maintain a constant speed that would best coordinate with the traffic signal system.
And with 9 years of experience now, presumably the driving public in the area has a pretty good sense that there's a BRT going through the neighborhood now. And if they didn't, they would see that the few remaining locations left in Los Angeles with red light cameras are right along that right-of-way. So that will no doubt catch the attention as well. So there might be some need for additional signage or those sorts of other things, but this is good to know that Metro can move forward with doing that analysis and then increasing the speeds. That could make a significant difference in the overall time of a trip from one end of the valley to the other.
That and better coordination of the bus speeds on average with the signaling system will give the buses a better opportunity to either get some additional green time or less red time. So that as well as the slightly improved speed through the intersection should generate anywhere from a 4 to 8 minute savings from end to end.
And that's the reason why we are in full support, the department's in full support of it, because the department sees it as an information system for Metro's Bus Operations Center. The data that sends to them needs to be decoded to be translated to something that Metro can use, and department's prepared to do that once there's an MOU and agreement subject to council's approval that we can execute the project.
One last point that I'd like you to look at in this too that's not explicitly stated in here, but one option that's been suggested for increasing capacity is to convoy buses so that a double articulated bus arrives and another one arrives right behind it so that two can be loaded at the same time and proceed through. That may require some changes in the signalization as well in order to allow adequate time for both vehicles to pass through on a single light. So that's something that I think we'll need to look at to see whether that's a feasible suggestion or not.
That is actually one of the options that we are looking at is the convoying of buses. It may require us to, instead of running every 4 minutes, maybe it runs every 6 minutes because you're doubling the capacity of those one bus. Yeah. And we'd have to come up with operating procedures that would assist the operators to stay together, because it's likely on an 18-mile trip that those buses could become separated, in which case you've defeated the whole purpose of that joining of those together.
Thank you.
Mr. Fritz?
Yeah, I think that this is a good idea, obviously, and I've had some feedback from people who sometimes take the Orange Line to get to downtown that the cumulative period is too slow, so if they need to get downtown expeditiously, they'll just drive their own car, which obviously defeats the purpose. The one thing I'd suggest is if we go from 10 to 25, that we try to phase it in a little bit, because I fear if you take the 10 to 25 jump, you may, in your experiment, find that you have a few accidents again. So if there was a way to do it maybe in 5-mile increments for a while and gradually move in that direction. That
We have some observations already where some of our operators are going through the intersections above 10 miles per hour. So we will in fact take a look at that information as well to see if that, in any of the traffic accidents that do occur there, we will investigate to see if speed had a factor in causing that accident.
very good.
Mr. Park, just wanted, this goes back a ways, but I thought at one time we had technology to synchronize the buses to where they may actually change the red light so they can go through. Is that still on the buses?
Well, that's signal preemption, and technically that can be done, but what that does when you're running a 4-minute frequency, a bus every 2 minutes, when you consider the opposite direction, that could cause some significant traffic congestion on the north-south or east-west streets that cross the Orange Line.
So we don't use that at all?
We have not
Not along
used that
Metro
yet.
Orange Line that was originally designed and envisioned, the Metro Orange Line.
What did we
design.
use it before? Was it just the regular buses? Because I remember years ago in the valley that they used that technology to synchronize with the light system, and the lights would be extended green so they could get through and whatever.
I understand, Councilmember Park. 20-some years ago, there was a test pilot project along Ventura Boulevard at the time before the Metro and City implemented the Metro Rapid Bus along Ventura Boulevard. And at the time, the technology was not there and the signal systems were very primitive. What you mentioned was more of a, at the time, vendor's package for emergency vehicles, for fire engines. And it was thought that if we can simply, if the fire engine's able to do that, then maybe we can use the same devices for the buses. And later on, the vendors itself were no longer in business, and the city had various issues and maintenance and supports and so forth. Currently, just to let you know, the current Metro Rapid Bus system of the city of 26 routes, that of which city's 4,500 signals, we have 1,500 signals with transit signal priority capability. That's a third of the city. Of a third of the city, the fire department had requested the same type of access as Metro Rapid, and they were given that as the direction of the council. So fire department's rapid response is also a beneficiary of a Metro Rapid system.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. I understand that a lot of the recommendations in this report actually came out of a 2013 Metro LA DOT working group document. I'm just wondering why some of them weren't implemented sooner.
I'm techie.
The working group was very productive, but then there was several changes in management on both LA DOT and Metro side. So we need to regroup now, get it back on course.
Okay. Good. We've got 4 public comment cards. Thank you, gentlemen. Kobe King, Doug Arsenault, Dennis Heineman, and it's hard to read this one, Mark Joyous? Jollis. And while you're coming up, let me just say one thing about this. Along with many other people, Zev Yaroslavsky was very instrumental in getting this started, and Zev is leaving. I think regardless of who wins, it's pretty clear that we have a very good champion for the Orange Line, whether it's enhanced service, Convoy Buses, or converting it into a light rail line, and Mr. Krikorian. He has made it a focus of his on the Metro Board. I know Mr. Blumenfield has done it here on the council as well. So I think this, as such a phenomenal example of mass transit done right, has continued champions that will bring it to the next generation of what it needs to be. Kobe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for saying those words. You saved me a little bit of time because I would have said something very similar about Mr. Krikorian. And I think it does bear repeating, though, that the Orange Line has been an incredible success. And by the way, I'm Kobe King. I'm the chairman of VICA and chief executive of a public affairs firm, High Point Strategies. The Orange Line has been incredibly successful. When it opened 9 years ago, it immediately exceeded Metro's expectations for what it would serve in opening months and fairly quickly reached capacity. I ride the Orange Line periodically, and especially at peak, it is pretty slow, unfortunately, and the buses do tend to bunch up. And so I think what we've been saying at VICA is that it's a victim of its own success. And so I applaud Councilman Blumenfield and Councilman Krikorian for bringing forward this motion. I think we need to do the things that are in here. I think we need to do more. This is an issue, by the way, that is not new. As some of you know, I used to chair a small council, has one of the longest names in the history of any government, the Los Angeles Metropolitan Transportation Agency, San Fernando Valley Service Sector Governance Council. And back then, we knew that the Orange Line needed to be speeded up. And to be honest, back then, the problem was LADOT. But I'm really glad that LADOT and Metro are now working better together. And I would just really strongly encourage this committee and the full council to stay on top of this issue, because getting these two agencies to work together has been it's been difficult and it's been frustrating. I do want to say one quick thing about signal preemption, and that is that while we understand that it causes complications, it is something that really ought to be looked more strongly into, especially at what I like to call the non-freeway crossing north-south streets. So streets like Mason, streets like Colfax, places where the Orange Line is crossing but isn't going to affect people trying to get on the freeway. That and some of the other things I think need to be strongly looked at, and we appreciate the council bringing this motion forward.
Doug? Good afternoon. I'm Doug Arsenault of VICA, a founding member of Valley on Track, a coalition of more than 30 community organizations, dozens of transportation advocates and elected officials calling for the expansion of the Metro rail system in the San Fernando Valley. We strongly support the motion by Councilmember Krikorian and Blumenfield to pursue immediate improvements to the Metro Orange Line, including utilization of technology and improved efficiency along the wildly successful but overcrowded system. The City of Los Angeles must work together with Metro, pursue every possible option to improve this backbone of the Valley's transit system. And we hope that these short-term improvements will serve as the beginning to improve coordination in the Valley between DOT and Metro. In addition to these improvements, we encourage the city to study more significant roadway crossings, potentially grade separations as a precursor to the upgrade of the Orange Line to light rail. These measures should also be taken into a context of the expansion of the system with the planned East Valley Transit Corridor, the Orange Line's counterpart as the Valley's first north-south dedicated right-of-way. We cannot express our appreciation enough to the council members, their colleagues, and Mayor Garcetti for the exceptional commitment to improving the Valley's transit infrastructure. We look forward to the evolution of these systems towards installation of rail lines that will finally connect the Valley to the Metro rail system. Thank you.
Mark?
I'm not for or against the Orange Line or anything like that, and I know people consider it a success. I just want to make sure you know what you're measuring it against. There's a rapid bus route that's the same length. They run every 90 seconds. They have triple-sized buses, 2 accordions in them, and they carry 300,000 trips a day. And they go through far more congested areas, far higher density, far more crossings. There is a policy called trip priority. I know San Francisco uses that. Whatever carries the most trips gets priority. So you might want to consider that in your intersections. And then the other thing, considering success of any transportation project, is what it does economically in terms of growth. And you have to see, are you getting any economic benefit from that line? Is there a lot of development at the stations, et cetera? There's very specific standards in how to measure the success of a project, and I wouldn't say that's successful or unsuccessful. I would just say, see what you measure against. The last thing is, the biggest complaint I heard, and it's very obvious, is that people have to cross the street to get to the subway station. And the federal government really likes to participate in improving existing facilities where there's already a constituency. So I would ask them to pay for an entrance on the other side of Lankershim and just put it in long term. Okay, put it in a long-term request and do the analysis, and then they'll measure it against benefits of other projects, and it's actually a line item in the budget. It doesn't come out of one big pool of money. They actually specifically put each request as a line item that's recommended by FTA. So it's free money, basically, and they would pay up to 80%, and I've seen them do it many times.
And in fact, that tunnel project is already approved. It will soon be underway. Construction's about to begin.
Great. Is it going straight into the station?
Yes.
Good. Okay, great. Let's see. And the feds are paying part of it?
That part I have to, follow up on.
Well,
Thanks for the
talk to
suggestion.
Senator Feinstein, they pay 80%, and I've seen it.
I think it's already budgeted.
100%?
Good.
Yeah, significantly federal funded.
Hi, my name is Dennis Hyman. I have literally ridden the Orange Line thousands of times from North Hollywood all the way down to Canoga Avenue. And I have written several very involved suggestions to Metro, and notice two of them are on the improvements. One is removing seats, that is for ingress, egress, higher capacity on the bus, and also you can load bicycles in the evening out of the aisle. The other one was electronic signs along the busway in order to allow the bus driver to know if he's going too fast or too slow in order to go through a green light. But I have noticed consistently there's certain intersections where they have to stop. And the only reason I can see for stopping the bus is for safety reasons. You must know that the driver has a very narrow peripheral vision. There's a lot of intersections where there's a wall or a building, and it's only 2 lanes. So they cannot see things approaching. So if a bicycle, they've hit at least one bicycle, but bicycles, pedestrians, or cars going through, they can't see them approaching in many of those intersections. But the problem with the DOT is they seem to be counting objects rather than people. They don't know how many people are inside the objects. So one bus at the intersection with 70 people is one object. 10 cars at that intersection, it's 10. So they tend to give the priority to the cars because they're more objects. But obviously, I can't see a circumstance where you want to stop the bus unless it's safety. You don't want the buses to go through, because of that peripheral vision problem, more than 25 miles an hour through the intersection. It's almost impossible for a driver to go 10 miles an hour. One driver pointed that out to me. You just can't slow it down fast enough to 10 miles an hour. So they do tend to be higher than 10 miles an hour. But the 3 most important factors for persuading people to use transit is speed, reliability, and frequency. And obviously the speed is what we need to work on in the Orange Line.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dennis and Mark, why don't you stay, because your general public comment, which we're going to get to in just a second. So without objection, this item is approved? All right. Okay, that brings us to general public comment.
Okay, going back to the Orange Line, going over some of the suggestions that I made about this is something that's going to be coming up for bus purchases. We're going to have the Van Nuys East San Fernando Valley Transit Corridor enhancement, and the life of the buses is, I believe, 13 and a half years. Now, a typical European bus for 60 feet, they have much less seats. It's about 63, I believe, in the Orange Line bus, and they have anywhere in the 40s to, say, 29. If you get it down to 29 to 31, you can get 50% more passengers on the bus. That's one of the factors, and also because it allows better movement within the bus, so you can get them on and off faster. So that is something to consider. Obviously, the suggestion removing some seats directly across from the door to enhance the ingress-egress passenger capacity was what I had already told them about, and they emailed me back, somebody from Metro that said as soon as they figure out how to do that, they'll do it. It was also, seats were removed on the rail lines, and the manager of the rail lines for Metro said, wow, you can get more passengers on because they're standing up rather than sitting down. So that's one thing to consider. Obviously, European buses are not manufactured here. I did notice that Van Hool does assemble buses here, and if they do have one that is 60 foot that can get seats as low as 31. So that's one way to automatically increase the capacity of that line. So it's a misunderstanding to believe that it's technology that we need. It's actually enhancements of service on that line, and we haven't run out of ideas how to do that. The platform on the North Hollywood subway, I also suggested, the Orange Line, I suggested 2 buses starting at the same time and one going off to Burbank, one going directly to Van Nuys Boulevard. That enhances it. So.
I forgot what I was going to say what that thing rings. Basically, I don't know how to put this. There's specific standards in terms of how to get a mode shift. Basically, take the 115 square meter trips, the people that drive, and convert them to 3 square meter trips, people that use transit. Very specific standards, and it's modeled and measured. It's based on travel time, cost, and convenience, and it's all simulated and modeled. The problem is, and that's what the 2020 group said about the 405, is that MTA was not looking at long-term demand when they planned projects. So you have the same problem with the 405 freeway, the Orange Line, the Expo Line, the new Midtown Crosstown Tunnel, is that they didn't actually look at long-range need before they proposed the project. It was based on political need rather than planning need. And that's the reason the federal government stopped the interstate system. That's why Caltrain, in 1992 with Ice-T, that's why certain cities dumped their freeways and built converted their light rail to mass transit to improve travel time, cost, convenience, etc. You're going to have the same problem with every project that you have in terms of getting ridership and getting that mode shift until you look at long-range regional trip projections. The Valley should absolutely have an analysis, and I met with Mr. Igrata 3 times from SCAG and with the Federal Highway Administration, who oversees what they do, and tried to get them to present the long-range regional trip projections the way other metropolitan areas do, and they do not want to do it, and they have the information. They sent me the data, but they would not put it in a format where you could see the deal. To give you an example, they added 2 lanes over the 405. Well, what if they needed 32 lanes? They didn't know because they didn't look at the long-term forecast. So basically, I think you got the message.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Desk is clear. We are adjourned. Thank you.